The Australian sun, a relentless, golden deity, beat down upon the red-tiled roofs of Perth in the year 1979. It baked the earth, shimmered off the Swan River, and imbued every breath with the scent of eucalyptus and salt. Into this radiant, sprawling city, on a crisp April morning, a boy named Heathcliff Andrew Ledger drew his first breath. His arrival was not a whisper but a vibrant declaration, a tiny new star in a sky already brimming with Southern Cross constellations. His parents, Kim and Sally Ledger, had chosen his name with a romantic flourish, a nod to Emily Bronte's tempestuous hero from Wuthering Heights. It was a name that carried the weight of wild moors and passionate, untamed spirits, perhaps an unwitting prophecy for the intense, soulful boy he would become. Their home, nestled in the suburbs, hummed with a quiet, artistic energy. Sally, a French teacher, filled the air with the lilting cadence of a foreign tongue and the gentle strum of a guitar. Kim, a racing car driver and mining engineer, brought a grounded, adventurous spirit, his hands often smelling of oil and possibility. Young Heathcliff, with his wide, observant eyes, absorbed it all, the scent of Sally's freshly baked bread mingling with the faint metallic tang from Kim's workshop, the hushed conversations, the distant roar of the Indian Ocean. His childhood unfolded like a sun-drenched dream, a kaleidoscope of sandy beaches, endless blue skies, and the joyous, uninhibited freedom of Australian youth. He was an inquisitive child, perpetually curious, his imagination a boundless ocean where pirate ships sailed and fantastical creatures roamed. He would spend hours lost in play in the sprawling backyard, beneath the shade of jacaranda trees, their purple blossoms raining down like confetti. Each leaf, each stone, each shadow held a story waiting to be discovered, a character waiting to be embodied. He possessed a burgeoning sense of independence, often wandering off on his own mental expeditions, a sensitivity to the nuances of the world around him that set him apart. He felt things deeply, observed them keenly, processing the world not just through his eyes and ears, but through an internal filter that sought meaning and connection. Yet, beneath this idyllic surface, a subtle fragility began to take root. The vibrant energy of his parents, once so harmoniously intertwined, began to shift, to vibrate at different frequencies. It was not a sudden rupture, but a slow, almost imperceptible widening of a crack in a beloved porcelain vase. A child's keen senses are often the first to register such changes. Heathcliff, then barely into his 10th year, felt the subtle chill that began to creep into the sun-warmed corners of their home, the lengthening shadows that fell across the dinner table during increasingly quiet meals. He might not have understood the complex adult emotions at play, but he understood the shift in atmosphere, the tightening around his mother's mouth, the distant gaze in his father's eyes. When the inevitable separation came, a decade into his young life, it was not an explosion, but a quiet, aching rearrangement of his world, leaving a tender space within him that would forever be attuned to the delicate balance of human connection and loss. The sun still shone in Perth, but a new, more nuanced light had begun to filter into his imaginative and sensitive soul. The scent of dust and old timber hung heavy in the air of the school auditorium, a familiar aroma that in the year 1992 became the very breath of possibility for a 13-year-old Heath Ledger. It was here, on the makeshift stage of Guildford Grammar School, that he stumbled upon a revelation, a profound calling that would reshape his destiny. His sister, Kate, a constant presence and confidant, had often nudged him towards creative outlets, sensing the restless energy that simmered beneath his quiet exterior. But it was in the spotlight, under the crude theatrical lighting, that Heath truly came alive. His first foray into acting was almost accidental, a reluctant step onto the stage for a school play. Yet, the moment he delivered his first line, a spark ignited. It wasn't just the words, but the way he inhabited them, the natural charisma that seemed to radiate from him, captivating his young audience. He discovered a thrilling freedom in shedding his own skin, in stepping into the shoes of another, in exploring emotions that perhaps he hadn't yet fully articulated within himself. The applause, a wave of sound crashing over him, was exhilarating, but it was the internal transformation that truly captivated him. He found a voice, a purpose, a way to channel the vivid imagination that had once filled his backyard with fantastical tales. From school plays, he moved quickly to amateur theater in Perth, devouring scripts, honing his craft with an intensity that belied his youth. He absorbed techniques, observed seasoned local actors, and experimented with character voices and physicality. There was a raw, undeniable talent about him, a magnetic quality that drew the eye, even in a crowded scene. His teachers, his peers, even his family all recognized this nascent gift. He wasn't just playing a part, he was becoming it, even if just for an evening. The stage became his crucible, a place where he could explore the vast landscape of human emotion, where his sensitivity, once a quiet observation, could now be projected and shared. By the age of 17, the decision crystallized with the clarity of a desert sky. School, with its rigid structure and conventional pathways, felt increasingly irrelevant. His passion for acting had consumed him, burning away all other distractions. He approached his parents with a quiet resolve, his eyes alight with a fierce determination. Kim and Sally, though perhaps surprised by the suddenness of his decision, recognized the unwavering conviction in their son. They had fostered his creative spirit, and now they watched as it demanded its own path. It was a bold leap of faith, fraught with the perceived risks of an uncertain artistic career, but Heath was fearless. He packed a bag, his heart thrumming with ambition, and turned his gaze eastward. Sydney, with its bustling energy and burgeoning film and television industry, beckoned like a siren song. The air in the city was different, charged with possibility, a stark contrast to the familiar, comforting warmth of Perth. He arrived, a young man on the cusp of his dreams, driven by an emerging passion, ready to conquer the world on his own terms. His psychological state was one of pure, unadulterated ambition, a fearless pursuit of an artistic calling that felt less like a choice and more like an undeniable destiny. The transition from the sun-drenched streets of Sydney to the glittering, often bewildering labyrinth of Hollywood was a whirlwind in 1998. One moment, Heath was a promising young actor navigating the local scene; the next, he was swept up in the exhilarating current of a major studio production. 10 Things I Hate About You was not just a film, it was a catapult, launching him into an orbit of instant fame and adulation. The set buzzed with an electric energy, a stark contrast to the smaller, more intimate productions he was accustomed to. Lights, cameras, a phalanx of crew members, it was a sensory overload, yet Heath, with his innate charm and undeniable screen presence, took to it with an amused, almost disbelieving grace. He found himself immersed in the glitz and demands of the Hollywood machine. Press junkets became a dizzying blur of flashing cameras and repetitive questions. Fan mail arrived in torrents, overflowing mailboxes with declarations of love from across continents. He was suddenly, unequivocally, a teen idol. His face, etched with that easy smile and those piercing eyes, adorned magazine covers. Girls screamed his name, boys envied his effortless cool. It was intoxicating, bewildering, and, for Heath, slightly overwhelming. He signed up to be an actor, to delve into characters, to tell stories, not to be a poster boy. Internally, he processed this sudden explosion of celebrity with a characteristic blend of amusement and a nascent desire to prove his depth. He understood the commercial appeal, played along with the public persona, but a quiet, insistent voice within him already yearned for more. He was grateful for the opportunity, for the doors it opened, but he felt a subtle dissonance between the image projected onto him and the artist he knew himself to be. The charming facade was a costume he wore with professional ease, but underneath, his artistic soul was already restless, eager to shed the skin of the teen heartthrob. The pressures were immediate: the constant scrutiny, the loss of anonymity, the feeling of being perpetually observed, even off-set. Every casual outing became a potential headline, every new acquaintance a possible source for gossip. It was a dizzying ascent, an exhilarating ride, but even as he smiled for the cameras, a part of him was already planning his escape from the gilded cage of celebrity, seeking roles that would challenge and define him beyond the fleeting adoration of a teenage crush. The new millennium, specifically the year 2001, found Heath Ledger deliberately charting a new course, determined to consolidate his position as a serious actor rather than simply basking in the glow of teen idol status. He actively sought out roles that were divergent, often uncomfortable, and always demanding, demonstrating a profound commitment to craft over the easy allure of celebrity. The purposeful intensity of this period was palpable, a deliberate shaping of his career with each calculated choice. He plunged into projects that showcased his versatility. A Knight's Tale presented him as a swashbuckling hero, William Thatcher, a role that required athleticism, charm, and a surprising emotional core beneath the armor. He embraced the physicality of the role, the clanging of metal, the roar of the crowd in the reimagined medieval jousting arenas. The scent of horses and leather became a familiar backdrop to his days, his focus sharp and unwavering. On set, he would often retreat into himself between takes, not aloof, but deeply concentrated, absorbing the atmosphere, preparing for the next emotional beat. Then came Monsters Ball, a stark, gritty drama that was a deliberate pivot from the lighter fare. Here, he played Sonny Grotowski, a correctional officer grappling with inherited prejudices and internal torment. The set was heavy with a different kind of intensity, the air thick with unspoken grief and simmering tension. Heath immersed himself in the character's bleak world, shedding the bright-eyed optimism of his earlier roles for a raw, vulnerable portrayal. He spent hours observing, listening, internalizing the pain and complexity of Sonny's existence. It was a role that demanded a stripping away of artifice, a courageous dive into the darker corners of the human psyche. This was a period of intense artistic exploration, where each script was a new landscape to traverse, each character a fresh challenge to conquer. He was creatively invigorated, finding immense satisfaction in the process of transformation. Conversations with directors and fellow actors were not about fame or box office receipts, but about character motivation, thematic depth, and the pursuit of truth within a scene. He was striving for authenticity, for artistic integrity in every choice he made, a quiet defiance against the industry's attempts to pigeonhole him. The focus in his eyes was sharper, his movements more deliberate. He felt the weight of expectation, not from the public, but from himself, a relentless internal drive to push his boundaries, to prove to himself, above all, that he was an artist of substance. The satisfaction he derived from these demanding roles was profound, a deep-seated contentment that went far beyond mere accolades. He was building something solid, brick by painstaking brick, a career defined by courageous choices and an unwavering dedication to the art form itself. The year 2005 arrived like a seismic shift, bringing with it a profound recalibration of Heath Ledger's personal and professional universe. The world watched, breathless, as Brokeback Mountain unfolded on screen, and with it, Heath's portrayal of Ennis Del Mar. It was a performance that was not merely acted but lived, a quiet, aching masterpiece that resonated with a universal truth about love, loss, and societal constraints. The critical acclaim was immediate and overwhelming, firmly establishing him as one of his generation's most profound and courageous actors. The film's impact was like a slow-burning fire, igniting conversations, challenging perceptions, and ultimately, garnering widespread adoration. For Heath, the experience of bringing Ennis to life had been deeply personal. He had approached the role with a trepidation born of respect for the character and the story. On the Wyoming set, under vast, indifferent skies, he had found a profound connection with his co-stars, Jake Gyllenhaal and Michelle Williams. The raw, emotional honesty demanded by the narrative had forged an unbreakable bond, especially with Michelle. The rugged landscape, the crisp mountain air, the quiet intensity of the work, it all contributed to an atmosphere of profound artistic validation. He spoke little about the process, but his eyes, when he did, held a faraway look, as if he still carried the weight of Ennis's unspoken grief. The triumph of Brokeback Mountain was immense, yet it arrived with a subtle, almost foreboding undertow. The spotlight, already bright, intensified to an almost blinding glare. Every aspect of his life became fodder for public consumption. Doors to even more demanding projects swung open, offering him roles that once seemed unattainable, but this artistic freedom came at a cost. The world wanted to know everything about the man who could evoke such raw emotion, and that extended beyond his performances. It was amidst this maelstrom of professional scrutiny that a deeply personal joy began to blossom. His relationship with Michelle Williams, born on the windswept plains of that pivotal film, deepened into a profound connection. They were a striking pair, their bond palpable, a quiet strength emanating from their shared experiences and artistic sensibilities. And then came the news, a whispered hope that quickly became a joyous certainty: they were expecting a child. The anticipation of fatherhood settled upon Heath with a weight that was both exhilarating and sobering. His psychological state during this period was a complex tapestry of accomplishment and introspection. He felt a deep, quiet pride in the work he had done, a satisfaction that resonated in his bones. Yet, this triumph was interwoven with a growing sense of profound responsibility. The weight of public expectation pressed in, a constant hum beneath the surface of his daily life. More importantly, the impending arrival of his daughter, Matilda, brought with it a new, potent sense of purpose. He was no longer just an actor, an artist driven by personal ambition, he was about to become a father. This new role, with its boundless love and immense vulnerability, grounded him even as the world around him spun faster. He looked at Michelle, her belly gently swelling, and felt a profound shift within, a recognition that while his career soared to new heights, his true anchor lay in the quiet promise of family. The path ahead, he instinctively knew, would be one of immense joy, but also one fraught with the growing tension between his public persona and the deeply private man he longed to be. The quiet promise of family, a nascent hope Heath Ledger had felt blooming within him, now contended with a profound, almost deafening roar. The year 2005 had not merely brought the critical triumph of Brokeback Mountain, it had unleashed a torrent. The film, a quiet revolution in cinema, became a global phenomenon, its tender, heart-wrenching narrative resonating far beyond the confines of film critics and art house audiences. Heath's portrayal of Ennis Del Mar, a performance steeped in a raw, almost unbearable vulnerability, was universally hailed as a masterpiece. He had given life to a character so deeply etched with longing and unspoken pain that it transcended the screen, burrowing into the collective consciousness. The Oscar nominations followed, a cascade of accolades that solidified his status, not just as a promising young actor, but as a leading dramatic force of his generation. The air around him, once merely charged with artistic ambition, now crackled with an almost overwhelming energy, a constant hum of expectation and adulation. Each glowing review, each award nomination, felt like a validation, a powerful confirmation of the path he had chosen, the risks he had taken. There was a deep, quiet pride that settled in his bones, a profound satisfaction in having delivered a performance that truly moved people, that started conversations. But this euphoric ascent was a double-edged sword, its gleaming surface reflecting not just triumph, but also a blinding, relentless glare. The media, initially focused on the artistic merit of Brokeback Mountain, quickly pivoted, their insatiable gaze turning inward, towards the man behind the performance. The revelation of his relationship with Michelle Williams, his co-star, had added another layer of intrigue, transforming a professional collaboration into a public romance. Then came the announcement of their pregnancy, a deeply personal joy that was instantly seized upon, dissected, and paraded across tabloids and entertainment news cycles. The world wanted to know everything. Paparazzi, once a distant nuisance, became a constant, aggressive shadow. Their lenses peered into every corner of his life, turning candid moments into sensational headlines. The streets of Los Angeles, once pathways to auditions and sets, now felt like gauntlets of flashing lights and shouted questions. Heath felt a growing sense of siege, a visceral discomfort with the erosion of his privacy. He was proud of his work, fiercely proud of Michelle, and overflowing with anticipation for their child, but the relentless intrusion felt predatory, an ugly counterpoint to the beauty he was experiencing. He found himself constantly vigilant, a protective instinct rising within him, a need to shield Michelle and their unborn daughter from the voracious appetite of the public eye. The joy of impending fatherhood, a profound and sacred emotion, was constantly being overshadowed by the relentless clamor, the endless speculation, the feeling of being perpetually observed, even in the most intimate corners of his life. The very air seemed to vibrate with this tension. The artistic triumph celebrated, while the personal life was relentlessly scrutinized, a stark reminder that success, in this gilded cage, came with a heavy, often suffocating price. Then, as the year 2005 drew to a close, a new anchor dropped, deep and true, into the swirling chaos of Heath's life. Matilda Rose Ledger entered the world, a tiny, perfect bundle who instantly reordered his entire universe. The moment he held her, a profound stillness settled over him, displacing the media frenzy, the awards buzz, the internal tug-of-war between public persona and private man. Her small hand clutching his finger, the scent of her newborn skin, the soft, fluttering beat of her breath against his chest, these were the things that mattered now, the undeniable truths that grounded him. The decision to move was swift and decisive. Hollywood, with its relentless hum and ever-present cameras, felt utterly incompatible with the sanctuary he yearned to build for his daughter. Brooklyn, with its brownstones, tree-lined streets, and a vibrant, yet more discreet, artistic community, beckoned as a haven. He and Michelle sought a semblance of normalcy, a quiet corner where Matilda could grow up away from the blinding glare. Their new home, nestled in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood, became their fortress, a nurturing, intimate space filled with the sounds of a baby's coos and the quiet rhythm of domestic life. The air here was different. It carried the scent of crisp autumn leaves and distant coffee, not the manufactured glamour of Los Angeles. Heath threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to his craft. He was a hands-on dad, changing diapers, waking for midnight feeds, pushing the stroller through Prospect Park, his face softened by an unguarded tenderness. He'd spend hours simply watching Matilda sleep, mesmerized by her tiny expressions, feeling a love so vast it almost hurt. This period was marked by his unwavering commitment to his family, often prioritizing story time and park visits over lucrative career opportunities. Scripts lay unread for days, calls from agents went unanswered as he immersed himself in the simple, profound joys of being a father. He found immense contentment in these moments, a deep, quiet happiness that resonated through his soul. Yet, even in this deliberate sanctuary, a subtle tension began to stir, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor beneath the surface of domestic bliss. His artistic spirit, though temporarily subdued by the sheer wonder of fatherhood, was still a restless, powerful force. The demands of an ambitious acting career, the hunger for challenging roles, the desire to continue pushing his boundaries, these were not easily extinguished. He loved his life in Brooklyn, cherished his time with Matilda, but the whispers of his professional calling, though soft, were persistent. It was a delicate balance, this beautiful, fragile piece he had found, and he knew, deep down, that the scales could tip at any moment, pulling him back into the demanding, all-consuming world he had briefly, deliberately, stepped away from. The joy was immense, but the quiet hum of his ambition, ever present, promised a future where this equilibrium would be tested. As the calendar turned to 2006, Heath Ledger's artistic hunger, though tempered by the profound responsibilities of fatherhood, began to reassert itself with a quiet, insistent force. He was determined to avoid the easy path, the kind of typecasting that often trapped actors of his caliber after a breakthrough role. Brokeback Mountain had opened doors, but he refused to walk through those that led to predictable, commercial fare. Instead, he sought out the unconventional, the challenging, the projects that promised a deeper dive into character and narrative. This was a period of deliberate artistic exploration, a restless spirit refusing to be confined by industry expectations. He gravitated towards independent cinema, towards less commercial projects that offered rich, complex characters. Each script was scrutinized not for its potential box office returns, but for its artistic merit, its capacity to provoke thought, to allow him to disappear completely into another skin. He embraced films that demanded intense character immersion, a process he had always found exhilarating, even if it meant extended periods of isolation and deep psychological work. The scent of musty library books, of old scripts, of quiet film sets in obscure locations, became his familiar landscape once more. His dedication to his craft was absolute. He would spend weeks, sometimes months, researching a role, building a character from the ground up, meticulously detailing their past, their quirks, their inner life. This wasn't merely acting, it was a profound act of self-discovery, a channeling of his own deep sensitivity and empathy into the fictional lives he inhabited. He would often speak of finding the character, of allowing them to emerge from within him, a process that was both intellectually stimulating and emotionally draining. He'd retreat into himself, shedding the veneer of Heath Ledger, the public figure, to become someone entirely new. His friends and family would sometimes remark on this transformation, noting how he would subtly shift, even in casual conversation, adopting nuances of the character he was preparing. The atmosphere around him during these creative periods was experimental, almost alchemical. There was a palpable energy of potential, of something new being forged. He thrived in this environment, his mind constantly buzzing with ideas, his body attuned to the subtle shifts in posture, voice, and gait that would define his next role. He pushed himself, relentlessly, always seeking to go deeper, to find a truth that resonated. Yet, beneath the surface of this intense artistic immersion, a subtle awareness began to grow, a quiet acknowledgement of the emotional and mental toll this relentless method acting was starting to take. The lines between himself and his characters, once clearly delineated, seemed to blur a little more with each new role. The process of disappearing felt increasingly real, and the return to himself, to Heath, the father, the partner, seemed to require a greater effort, a longer journey back. The restlessness, while creatively fertile, also hinted at a deeper disquiet, a constant search for something just beyond his grasp, a subtle foreshadowing of the profound challenges that lay ahead. The subtle erosion began almost imperceptibly, a creeping shadow beneath the brilliant surface of Heath's success and domestic contentment. As the intensity of his artistic pursuits deepened in 2006, coupled with the relentless pressure of maintaining a public profile and nurturing a young family, his sleep patterns began to fray. It started innocently enough, a night of tossing and turning after a particularly demanding day on set, a mind too revved up to shut down. Then another, and another. The quiet sanctuary of his Brooklyn home, once a haven of peace, began to feel like a cage in the lonely hours of the night. He reportedly began experiencing insomnia, a problem that would progressively worsen, tightening its grip with each passing week. The exhaustion was insidious, seeping into his bones, dulling the sharp edges of his normally vibrant personality. He'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the city's distant hum a mocking lullaby. His thoughts would race, replaying scenes, dissecting character motivations, worrying about Matilda, about Michelle, about the next project. The silence of the night, once comforting, became oppressive, amplifying every anxious thought. The hours stretched, mocking him, until the first gray light of dawn broke, bringing with it not rest, but the crushing weight of another day to face on too little sleep. The fatigue became a constant companion, a heavy cloak he wore even as he smiled for the cameras, played with Matilda, or discussed a script with a director. His eyes, once so bright and piercing, sometimes held a faint, weary glaze. He tried the natural remedies first: warm milk, herbal teas, meditation, but they offered only fleeting relief, if any. The desperation for sleep, for just a few hours of oblivion, grew with each sleepless night. This led, inevitably, to an increasing reliance on sleep aids. A tablet, then two, then a cocktail of different prescriptions, a desperate, often futile, attempt to silence the buzzing in his brain and coax his body into surrender. The atmosphere around him, though still outwardly successful and domestically warm, began to carry a subtle undercurrent of unease. Friends and family might have noticed a slight tremor in his hands, a quicker snap in his responses when overtired, a distant look in his eyes. Internally, Heath was fatigued, increasingly anxious, grappling with the nascent stages of sleep deprivation. The challenge of managing his well-being felt like a constant, uphill battle. He was a man accustomed to conquering challenges, to mastering his craft, but this invisible foe, this inability to simply rest, was proving far more formidable. It was a silent, internal struggle, hidden behind the charming smile and the focused intensity of his artistic endeavors. A creeping shadow that threatened to consume the light from within. The knowledge that he was losing this fundamental fight for rest gnawed at him, adding another layer of anxiety to an already complex and demanding life. The air in 2007 was charged with an almost palpable anticipation, a thrilling, terrifying electricity that heralded a pivotal moment in Heath Ledger's career. The announcement of his casting as the Joker in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight sent ripples through the industry and ignited a firestorm of discussion among fans. It was a role steeped in iconic history, a character so deeply embedded in popular culture that the pressure was immense, almost suffocating. Initial reactions were mixed. Some applauded the bold choice, others questioned if the dashing leading man could truly embody such a twisted, anarchic villain. For Heath, receiving the call, hearing Nolan's vision, felt like standing on the precipice of a vast dark canyon. It was the ultimate challenge, a role that promised both professional zenith and personal abyss. His psychological state was a complex tapestry woven with intrigue and intense focus, a palpable sense of both excitement and trepidation. The chance to reinvent such an iconic character, to delve into the very heart of chaos, was an artistic opportunity he couldn't refuse. Yet, he understood the profound commitment it would demand, the darkness he would have to inhabit. He began his meticulous preparation almost immediately, a process that would prove profoundly transformative, not just for the performance, but for him. He devoured comic books, not just for plot, but for the subtle nuances of the Joker's madness, his philosophy of anarchy. He studied the history of the character, watched previous portrayals, only to discard them, determined to forge his own, utterly unique interpretation. The goal was not imitation, but reinvention, a descent into the raw, unadulterated essence of villainy. He started sketching in a journal, filling pages with distorted faces, macabre smiles, and chaotic scrawls, attempting to visualize the Joker's internal landscape. He experimented with voices, contorting his own vocal cords, searching for the perfect cadence of madness, the chilling laugh that would haunt audiences. This was not a character to be merely played, it was a character to be become. He knew, instinctively, that this role would demand total immersion, a complete surrender to the dark forces he was about to unleash. The artistic challenge thrilled him, invigorating his restless spirit. He felt a surge of creative energy, a profound sense of purpose. But beneath the excitement lay a growing trepidation. He was aware of the toll his previous method acting had taken, the blurred lines between himself and his characters. The Joker, however, felt different, more dangerous, a descent into a psychological landscape far more treacherous than anything he had attempted before. He knew this would not be a performance he could simply shake off at the end of the day. It would seep into his pores, inhabit his thoughts, challenge his very sense of self. The looming challenge promised to push him to his absolute limits, to an edge he hadn't yet explored, and he approached it with a quiet, intense resolve, a blend of artistic courage and a deep, unsettling awareness of the profound personal cost. The path ahead was clear, and it led directly into the heart of darkness. The year 2007 began with a chilling invitation, a descent into a darkness Heath Ledger had only ever brushed against in his most demanding roles. Christopher Nolan's vision for the Joker in The Dark Knight was not merely a character, it was an abyss, and Heath, with his insatiable artistic hunger, willingly stepped to its edge. He sought not to mimic, but to reinvent, to forge an entirely new iteration of the iconic villain. This quest for authenticity led him to a self-imposed exile, a quiet London hotel room that would become his crucible for weeks on end. The room itself was unremarkable, a beige box overlooking the muted grays of the city, but within its walls, a profound transformation began. Heath stripped away the familiar comforts, the distractions of the outside world, and plunged headfirst into the chaotic mind of the Joker. The air grew thick with the scent of stale coffee, discarded takeout containers, and the metallic tang of ink from countless pens. His personal journal, a leather-bound volume that would become a chilling artifact, became his constant companion. He filled its pages with meticulous detail, grotesque sketches of clowns with smeared makeup, scrawled notes on the Joker's twisted philosophy of anarchy, chilling dialogues, and frantic, almost illegible stream of consciousness ramblings. He documented potential voices, contorting his own throat, experimenting with the cadence of madness, the guttural rumble that would precede a chilling laugh, the high-pitched cackle that would send shivers down spines. He studied the pathology of psychopaths, the jerky, unpredictable movements of hyenas, the unsettling stillness of a shark. He immersed himself in punk rock music, the discordant rhythms mirroring the Joker's internal chaos. The television played A Clockwork Orange on repeat, the disturbing ballet of ultra-violence becoming a strange, twisted lullaby. The lines between Heath and the character began to blur, not in a sensationalized, cinematic way, but subtly, insidiously. He found himself thinking in the Joker's voice, seeing the world through his nihilistic lens. Sleep, already a fleeting visitor, became an impossible dream. His mind, perpetually revved, refused to quiet. He would lie awake for hours, the Joker's voice whispering in his head, mocking his attempts at rest, pulling him deeper into the character's psyche. The psychological strain was immense, a constant pressure behind his eyes, a hum of disquiet in his very bones. He was driven by an unyielding pursuit of artistic perfection, a desperate need to honor Nolan's trust and to deliver a performance that would be utterly unforgettable. Yet, with each page filled, each voice practiced, each dark thought explored, he felt a part of himself receding, a quiet observer watching as the Joker took root. The claustrophobic atmosphere of the hotel room, the endless hours spent in solitude with only the character for company, created an obsessive feedback loop. He was building something extraordinary, terrifying, but the cost, though not yet fully apparent, was already being tallied in the quiet erosion of his own peace. He was a man possessed, not by an external force, but by his own relentless artistic drive, pushing himself to the brink, convinced that only through absolute immersion could he truly capture the essence of the clown prince of crime. The world outside, with its mundane concerns, faded into an indistinct blur, replaced by the vivid, terrifying landscape of the Joker's mind. The transition from the solitary confinement of his London hotel room to the bustling, high-pressure environment of The Dark Knight, set in 2007, was a jarring shift. Yet Heath carried the Joker within him, a fully formed entity ready to erupt. The air on set crackled with a unique energy, a blend of creative excitement and the immense weight of expectation for a film of this scale. The smell of grease paint and latex became his second skin, a constant reminder of the transformation he underwent each day. Hours in the makeup chair, meticulously applying the scarred grin and smeared white face, were not merely a technical necessity but a ritual, a further shedding of Heath and an embrace of the Joker. From the first take, his portrayal was electrifying. Christian Bale, who played Batman, would later recount how Heath's Joker was genuinely unsettling, a force of unpredictable chaos. Christopher Nolan, a director known for his calm demeanor, was visibly awed by the intensity of Heath's performance. The famous interrogation scene, a raw, brutal ballet of psychological warfare between Batman and the Joker, showcased Heath's utter immersion. He wasn't just acting, he was the Joker, his voice a chilling rasp, his movements unnervingly fluid, his eyes glinting with a terrifying, anarchic glee. The set became a crucible, forging creative genius through profound personal sacrifice. But this intensity came at a steep price. The physically demanding nature of the role, the stunts, the long hours, the heavy makeup exacerbated his existing sleep issues to an alarming degree. He often spoke to cast and crew about his inability to sleep, a weary, almost desperate refrain. "I can only get a couple of hours of sleep a night, even with medication," he'd confess, his voice a low rumble, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He tried various prescribed sleep aids, hoping for oblivion, for just a few precious hours of respite, but his mind refused to surrender. It would race, dissecting scenes, crafting new improvisations for the Joker, or simply buzzing with an unbearable restlessness. His colleagues observed the toll it was taking. There were days when his energy seemed boundless, fueled by the manic energy of the character. But these bursts were often followed by periods of profound fatigue, a visible slump in his posture when the cameras weren't rolling. He was emotionally raw, his nerves frayed from the constant psychological immersion and the relentless sleep deprivation. Yet, he maintained a facade of control, a professional grace that belied the internal battle raging within him. He was committed, unwavering, pushing himself beyond conventional limits, convinced that this extreme dedication was essential for the character. The cold, sterile air of the set at night, the taste of exhaustion in his mouth, the constant ache behind his eyes, these were the physical manifestations of his sacrifice. He was delivering a performance for the ages, but he was doing so on the very edge of his physical and mental capacity, a tightrope walk between artistic brilliance and profound personal cost, each step pushing him further into the isolating grip of his own making. The triumph was undeniable, yet it was shadowed by the growing, insidious tendrils of fatigue and mental strain that were slowly, relentlessly, consuming him. The relentless demands of The Dark Knight, and Heath's unyielding immersion in the Joker's psyche cast a long, fracturing shadow over his personal life as 2007 wore on. The delicate balance he had striven to maintain between his ambitious career and his cherished family unit began to buckle under the immense pressure. Michelle Williams, his partner and the anchor of his world, watched with a growing sense of alarm as the man she loved seemed to slip further and further into the character, his sleeplessness becoming a constant, unwelcome presence in their Brooklyn home. The atmosphere in their brownstone, once a sanctuary of warmth and laughter, grew fractured, tinged with a melancholic quiet. The air, thick with unspoken anxieties, became heavy with the weight of Heath's exhaustion and his increasingly distant demeanor. He would return from filming, not quite himself, the Joker's echoes lingering in his eyes, his mind still racing with the character's twisted logic. Conversations became strained, punctuated by his distracted gaze or his sudden, restless movements. Michelle, ever empathetic, tried to reach him, to pull him back, to remind him of the bright, loving Heath beneath the layers of character. She worried about his health, his increasing reliance on sleep aids, and the profound impact this all had on their spirited young daughter, Matilda. They tried, truly, to maintain their family unit. There were hushed conversations, attempts at quiet nights in, shared moments of tenderness. But the pressures were insurmountable. The physical distance of filming, the psychological chasm created by his immersion, and the relentless, gnawing beast of his insomnia drove an ever-widening wedge between them. Heath felt a profound sadness, a deep, aching regret as he recognized the pain he was inadvertently causing. He loved Michelle fiercely, adored Matilda beyond words, but he felt trapped, caught between the insatiable demands of his craft and the desperate need for rest that eluded him. His guilt was a heavy cloak, weighing him down, adding to the already immense anxieties that plagued his sleepless nights. The decision to separate was not a sudden rupture, but a slow, agonizing unraveling. A painful acknowledgement that their cherished life together, in its current form, was unsustainable. The discussions were heartbreaking, filled with tears and the quiet despair of two people who loved each other but could no longer navigate the impossible terrain they found themselves on. The thought of Matilda, her bright, innocent eyes, becoming a child of separated parents, tore at Heath's heart. He vowed to remain an ever-present, loving father, but the fracturing of their family unit, the loss of that intimate daily connection, was a devastating blow. The once vibrant home now felt hollow, echoing with the ghosts of what had been, a stark testament to the profound personal cost of his artistic pursuit. He was heartbroken, profoundly regretful, grappling with the immense emotional fallout, and the knowledge that his choices, his struggles, had irrevocably altered the landscape of his most cherished relationships. The external pressures of fame and the internal pressures of artistic obsession had culminated in a deeply personal tragedy, adding another layer of heavy, suffocating anxiety to his already burdened soul. In the wake of his separation from Michelle Williams, as 2007 drifted towards its end, Heath Ledger's battle with insomnia escalated into a desperate, all-consuming war. The quiet, intimate sanctuary of his Brooklyn home, once a beacon of family warmth, now felt vast and empty, amplifying the hollow ache of loneliness and the relentless ticking of the clock in the long, dark hours. The absence of Michelle and Matilda, though he saw his daughter regularly, created a profound void that no amount of professional acclaim could fill. His inability to sleep became an open secret among his closest friends and family. He spoke of it with a weary frankness, a desperate plea for understanding in his eyes. "I just can't switch my brain off," he confessed, running a hand through his often disheveled hair. He described nights spent pacing, reading, trying every trick he knew, only for his mind to race with an unbearable urgency, replaying conversations, envisioning future scenes, or simply buzzing with an undefined anxiety. The profound effects of chronic sleep deprivation began to manifest visibly. His once vibrant gaze was often clouded with fatigue, his movements sometimes jerky with agitation. His skin, usually clear, occasionally showed the signs of stress and lack of rest. The search for relief became a relentless, spiraling cycle. He openly discussed taking various prescribed medications, a cocktail of different pills, each promising a few hours of oblivion, a temporary reprieve from the torment. The ritual became a familiar, bleak one. The small glasses of water by the bedside, the precise arrangement of tablets, each swallowed with a desperate hope that this time, they would work. Sometimes they did, offering a fitful, shallow sleep. More often, they offered nothing but a foggy, disoriented morning, the exhaustion still clinging to him like a shroud. The taste of these pills, often bitter and metallic, became synonymous with his struggle. Friends, like Jerry Grenell, his dialect coach and confidant, observed his increasing reliance on these aids with growing concern. They saw the visible decline in his physical and emotional well-being, the way his energy would fluctuate wildly, the subtle tremor in his hands, the distant look in his eyes when he was particularly worn down. They offered advice, comfort, tried to distract him, but felt helpless against the invisible enemy that held him captive each night. Heath was caught in a desperate struggle for respite, an agitated, increasingly fragile man trapped in a relentless cycle of sleeplessness. The profound effects of chronic sleep deprivation were not just physical, they were psychological, eroding his resilience, sharpening his anxieties, and leaving him feeling perpetually on edge, caught in a lonely, desperate battle against his own weary mind and body. The quiet desperation of his search for sleep permeated his every interaction, a palpable sense of unease that clung to him like a second skin. The surreal, fantastical world of Terry Gilliam's The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus was meant to be an escape, a creative balm after the intense darkness of the Joker. Instead, as filming commenced in 2007, it became a poignant, almost heartbreaking tableau for Heath Ledger's growing fragility. The atmosphere on set was vibrant, imaginative, filled with the whimsical chaos that was Gilliam's signature, but beneath the vibrant costumes and elaborate sets, a somber undercurrent flowed. Heath's physical and mental state was visibly deteriorating, causing deep concern among his colleagues. His face, though still handsome, was often gaunt, etched with the profound fatigue that had become his constant companion. His eyes, usually so expressive, held a weary, distant gaze, and there was a subtle tremor in his movements that hinted at an internal agitation he could no longer fully conceal. The relentless insomnia, coupled with the emotional toll of his separation and the residual psychological effects of the Joker, had worn him down to a frightening degree. He looked, quite simply, exhausted, a man pushing himself beyond human limits. Terry Gilliam, who had worked with Heath before and held him in high regard, observed his struggles with a heavy heart. He knew the depths of Heath's commitment, his artistic courage, but he also saw the cost. Despite his visible struggles, Heath remained fiercely committed to his craft. He still brought his characteristic intensity to each scene, still sought to elevate the material. He improvised, as was his genius, adding layers to his character, Tony, a mysterious outsider who becomes part of Dr. Parnassus's fantastical troupe. There were moments of brilliance, flashes of the Heath Ledger that everyone knew, but they were interspersed with periods of profound weariness, where he seemed to be pushing through immense personal pain to deliver a performance. His colleagues, including Christian Bale, who visited the set, noticed the change. They saw a man bravely, almost defiantly, striving for artistic excellence even as his own body and mind seemed to betray him. The scent of grease paint and stage smoke mixed with the chill of location filming in Vancouver, a stark contrast to the fantastical illusions being created. Every smile he offered, every line he delivered, felt like an immense effort, a testament to his sheer will. The signs of his internal turmoil were unmistakable, written plainly on his face and in the quiet desperation that sometimes flickered in his eyes. He was a brave but ultimately unsustainable effort, a man on the precipice, pouring his last reserves of energy into a final, beautiful, and deeply poignant artistic endeavor. The set, with its whimsical, dreamlike quality, became a stage not just for the film's narrative, but for the quiet, heartbreaking drama of Heath Ledger's own final act, a testament to his unwavering dedication even as the shadows lengthened around him. The air was thick with the bittersweet scent of creation and the growing, unspoken fear for a beloved friend. The fantastical illusions of Terry Gilliam's set, vibrant and chaotic, had slowly dissolved into the stark, biting reality of a New York winter. The air in January 2008 was sharp, carrying the metallic tang of exhaust fumes and the distant, muffled roar of the city that never slept. For Heath Ledger, however, the city's relentless energy felt less like a pulse and more like a cruel mockery. Sleep, that most fundamental human need, remained an elusive phantom, its absence gnawing at his very core. He was back in his Soho apartment, a space that should have been a refuge, but instead often felt like a gilded cage. The minimalist decor, the high ceilings, the expansive windows looking out onto the gray, unforgiving cityscape, it all seemed to amplify his internal turmoil rather than soothe it. The scent of fresh coffee, a brief comfort in the mornings, would quickly give way to the bitter, lingering taste of the various pills he tried to manage. He was caught in a desperate, almost frantic dance, attempting to balance the fragments of his life, his cherished visits with Matilda, the ongoing, though now less demanding, work commitments related to Parnassus, and the relentless, debilitating grip of his insomnia and anxiety. His days were a blur of restless motion, punctuated by moments of profound exhaustion. He would walk Matilda through the crisp winter air, bundled against the cold, his hand clasped around her small, warm one. In those moments, a fragile peace would descend, a brief respite from the buzzing in his mind. He'd watch her laugh, her breath misting in the cold, and for a fleeting instant, the weight of the world would lift. But even then, the undercurrent of weariness was always present, a low thrum beneath the surface of his fatherly joy. He was perpetually searching for solutions, for a way to quiet the storm within. Conversations with friends and even Dr. Richard Feingold, his personal physician, revolved increasingly around his sleep. He'd described the cycle, the racing thoughts, the physical agitation, the profound fatigue that refused to yield to rest. His speech, usually vibrant and expressive, sometimes took on a hesitant, almost fragile quality, as if each word required an immense effort. The apartment itself, usually filled with the vibrant energy of a young father, now often held a tense, fragile quiet. Heath would pace its length in the dead of night, the floorboards creaking softly under his restless feet, the city lights painting long, skeletal shadows across the walls. He'd pick up a book, only to find his eyes blurring over the words. He'd try to meditate, to breathe deeply, but his mind, a relentless, untamed engine, refused to slow. The pills, meticulously arranged on his bedside table, were a constant, silent testament to his struggle. Oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, doxylamine, a pharmacopoeia of relief. Each prescribed for a specific ailment, each offering a sliver of hope for sleep, for calm, for a moment of peace. But the combination, the delicate balance of how much and when, became a terrifying, unpredictable experiment. He was trying to manage them, to find the perfect alchemy that would grant him a few hours of oblivion, but his body and mind, frayed and exhausted, seemed to resist all efforts. The air around him felt heavy, laden with unspoken burdens, a quiet, almost imperceptible build-up to an inevitable and tragic conclusion. He was exhausted, restless, caught in a desperate and ultimately futile search for the peace that forever eluded him, burdened by the immense weight of his struggles. His gaze often distant, lost in the labyrinth of his own sleepless thoughts. The morning of January 22, 2008, dawned with an ordinary, almost deceptive stillness over New York City. The gray light filtered through the high windows of Heath Ledger's Soho apartment at 421 Broome Street, illuminating dust motes dancing in the cold air. The scent of lingering coffee from earlier, perhaps a faint trace of the pills he'd taken the night before, hung in the quiet apartment. There was nothing to suggest the profound shift that was about to occur, no dramatic foreshadowing, just the mundane ticking of a clock and the distant murmur of city life beginning its day. At approximately 2:45 p.m., Diana Wolozin, a masseuse Heath knew, arrived for a scheduled appointment. She carried her bag, her mind on the usual rhythm of her day, the familiar anticipation of a professional engagement. She let herself in with a key Heath had given her, expecting to find him awake, perhaps preparing for their session. She called out his name, a polite, professional greeting, but received no answer. The apartment, usually vibrant, felt unnaturally still, the silence almost palpable. A subtle unease began to prickle at her. She moved through the rooms, her footsteps quiet on the polished floors, the scent of wood and faint cleaning products in the air. She found him in his bedroom, lying motionless in his bed. The scene was devoid of any visible struggle or distress, but the stillness was absolute, unnatural. Her professional eye, trained to observe the human body, registered the terrifying truth almost immediately. Heath was unresponsive. Confusion, sharp and disorienting, gave way to a wave of pure, gut-wrenching disbelief. It was impossible. This vibrant, talented young man, so full of life and artistic fire, could not be. She tried to rouse him, her voice rising in urgency, a desperate plea against the silence. When he remained still, a cold dread began to set in. In a frantic, desperate attempt to find help, she reached for her phone. The first person she called was Mary Kate Olson, a close friend of Heath's, whose number was programmed into his phone. She called Mary Kate twice, hoping for guidance, for someone to tell her what to do, how to fix this impossible situation. When Mary Kate, who was in California, suggested she call security, Diana did. Then she called 911. The sound of sirens, initially distant, grew rapidly, cutting through the city's hum, a harsh, definitive declaration that something irreversible had happened. The rapid response of emergency services paramedics, police officers shattered the apartment's quiet. Their movements were swift, efficient, but the solemnity on their faces spoke volumes. The scent of antiseptic and the sterile tang of medical equipment filled the air, replacing the familiar smells of the home. The apartment, once a private haven, was now a crime scene, a somber stage for a tragedy. At 3:36 p.m., after their futile attempts to revive him, Heath Ledger was officially pronounced dead at the scene. The world outside, unaware, continued its bustling day, but within the walls of that Soho apartment, time had stopped, brutally, definitively. It was a moment of profound shock and tragic finality that would reverberate globally, leaving an immediate, indelible mark of utter disbelief for those who witnessed it, an abrupt and devastating end to a life of immense talent and potential. The silence that followed the pronouncement was deafening, a heavy, suffocating blanket of grief and incomprehension. In the immediate, chaotic aftermath, as January to February 2008 unfolded, the city of New York and indeed, the entire world, grappled with the shocking news. The Soho apartment, once a private sanctuary, became the epicenter of a swirling media storm. Flashing cameras illuminated the street below, reporters shouted questions, and the air buzzed with frantic speculation. The initial reports were confused, fragmented, offering little clarity, only compounding the sense of disbelief and sorrow. Amidst the public frenzy, a quiet, methodical process began. The police investigation commenced with a somber precision, officers moving through the apartment, documenting, collecting evidence, their movements clinical and detached. Every detail, from the arrangement of the room to the presence of various prescription bottles, was meticulously recorded. The body of Heath Ledger was transported to the office of the chief medical examiner, where Dr. Richard Feingold, Heath's personal physician, as documented in police reports, would have been among those consulted, providing crucial context. The subsequent weeks were agonizing. The public, desperate for answers, hung on every snippet of information, while the medical examiner's office conducted a thorough toxicology analysis. This was not a quick process. It required painstaking examination of tissue and fluid samples to identify every substance present in his system and to determine their precise concentrations. The air during this period was heavy with a clinical, somber tension, as the methodical unraveling of facts slowly began to replace the wild, speculative theories that had gripped the media. The scent of antiseptic and laboratory chemicals, though unseen, permeated the atmosphere of the investigation, a stark contrast to the human tragedy at its heart. Finally, on February 6, the official cause of death was announced. It was a statement that, while bringing clarity, also brought a fresh wave of profound sadness. Heath Ledger's death was determined to be acute intoxication by the combined effects of oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, and doxylamine. The language was precise, medical, detailing the specific cocktail of prescribed medications that had, in combination, proved fatal. The ruling was clear: an accidental overdose. There was no foul play, no deliberate act. It was a tragic accident, a devastating miscalculation in his desperate, weary search for sleep and calm. This official explanation, while stark, brought a measure of understanding to the incomprehensible. It painted a picture of a man overwhelmed, struggling with severe insomnia and anxiety, attempting to self-medicate his way to peace. For his family, for Michelle, for his friends, the news was a heartbreaking confirmation of the internal battles they had witnessed him fighting. The collective sadness that swept across the globe was profound, a mournful acceptance of the stark reality. The clinical findings, devoid of emotion, nonetheless underscored the immense human cost of his struggles, replacing speculation with a tragic, undeniable medical explanation, leaving those who mourned him seeking understanding in the face of such a sudden, senseless loss. The silence after the announcement was different now. It was not one of confusion, but of a deep, aching grief, settling like a heavy shroud over the world. As February 2008 wore on, the initial shock gave way to a global outpouring of grief, a collective lament for a talent extinguished far too soon. The world, which had watched Heath Ledger's star rise with such brilliance, now mourned its sudden, devastating fall. The air was thick with sorrow, a palpable reverence for the young actor who had touched so many lives with his raw honesty and magnetic presence. Tributes poured in from every corner of the globe, a cascade of heartfelt eulogies from fans, colleagues, and family. Christopher Nolan, his director on The Dark Knight, spoke of his fearless and inventive spirit. Christian Bale, his co-star, expressed his profound sadness, remembering Heath's intense dedication. Terry Gilliam, who had witnessed his final, brave efforts, spoke of the immense joy Heath brought to their set, even in his struggles. Jake Gyllenhaal, his Brokeback Mountain brother, shared memories of their deep bond, the quiet moments of connection that had forged their friendship. Michelle Williams, his former partner and the mother of his daughter, released a statement through a spokesperson, expressing her heartbreak and focusing on Matilda's future, a testament to her enduring love and concern. His family, Kim and Sally Ledger, and his sister Kate, though consumed by their private agony, spoke with dignity and immense love. They remembered him not just as the celebrated actor, but as their son, their brother, a kind, sensitive, and profoundly creative soul. Their words painted a picture of a man who cherished his family above all else, who possessed a generosity of spirit that touched everyone he met. The global mourning was not just for the artist, but for the human being, for the vibrant, complex man who had navigated the intense pressures of fame with a rare authenticity. Memorial services were held, some private, cloaked in the quiet dignity of family and closest friends, others more public, allowing the wider community to pay their respects. The air in these gatherings was heavy with unshed tears, the scent of lilies and somber reverence. People shared stories, anecdotes that highlighted his mischievous humor, his deep empathy, his unwavering dedication to his craft. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to embody the fleeting nature of life. Each tribute, each shared memory, was a thread in a vast tapestry of sorrow, reflecting the profound impact he had on so many lives. For those who knew him, the grief was devastating, a profound sense of loss that cut to the bone. They reflected on his dazzling talent, the moments of shared laughter, the deep conversations, and the quiet struggles he had faced. There was a collective yearning to understand, to somehow rewind time, to prevent the tragedy. But ultimately, there was only the raw, aching reality of his absence, and an overwhelming desire to honor his memory and the extraordinary legacy he had already begun to forge. The world felt a little dimmer, a little quieter, having lost one of its brightest, most promising stars. As the summer of July 2008 onwards arrived, bringing with it the release of The Dark Knight, the world was invited to witness the full, terrifying brilliance of Heath Ledger's final, monumental performance. The atmosphere surrounding the film was electric, charged with a bittersweet anticipation. The Joker, as brought to life by Heath, was not merely a character. He was a force of nature, an embodiment of pure, unadulterated chaos that transcended all previous interpretations. His chilling laugh, his unpredictable physicality, the raw, unsettling madness in his eyes, it was a portrayal that left audiences stunned, critics scrambling for superlatives, and fellow actors in awe. The film was an undeniable triumph, a cinematic masterpiece, and at its heart was Heath's iconic performance. The critical acclaim was immediate and universal, cementing his place as one of the greatest actors of his generation. The whispers that began after his death, suggesting a posthumous Academy Award, grew into a resounding chorus. The following year, in 2009, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences confirmed what many already knew: Heath Ledger was awarded the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. The moment, received by his grieving family, was powerful, poignant, and profoundly bittersweet. The golden statue, a symbol of ultimate achievement, stood as a testament to his genius, yet it was accepted in his absence, a stark reminder of the immense loss. His legacy, however, transcended the sorrow of his untimely death. His portrayal of the Joker sparked important, often difficult, conversations that resonated far beyond the realm of cinema. It ignited discussions about mental health, the insidious grip of insomnia, and the intense, often perilous pressures of fame. People began to openly address the toll that method acting could take, the psychological cost of deep character immersion. Heath's life and work became a touchstone, a powerful, albeit tragic, example of the thin line between artistic dedication and personal well-being. His family, through their profound grief, ensured his artistic spirit would live on. They established the Heath Ledger Scholarship, a beacon of hope designed to support emerging Australian actors, providing them with opportunities and encouragement to pursue their dreams. This initiative, infused with Heath's own generous and adventurous spirit, became a living tribute, a way for his passion to continue inspiring new generations. Matilda, his daughter, grew up with the knowledge of her father's extraordinary talent and the immense love he held for her. Michelle Williams, her mother, became a fierce protector of Heath's memory and Matilda's privacy, ensuring that his legacy was honored with dignity and grace. The enduring presence of Heath Ledger in cinema, through his diverse and powerful body of work, continues to inspire and challenge. His performances remain timeless, each a testament to his unwavering commitment to authenticity and his remarkable ability to inhabit the vast landscape of human emotion. The atmosphere surrounding his memory is one of enduring bittersweetness, a powerful testament to his artistic genius interwoven with the lingering sorrow of his absence. For those who watch his films, for those who remember his life, there is a profound sense of reflection. His story continues to offer lasting contemplation on the nature of talent, the fragility of life, and the profound lessons that his extraordinary journey and work continue to offer. Heath Ledger, the boy from Perth with the Wuthering Heights namesake, ultimately became a cinematic titan, leaving behind a legacy that is as complex and deeply moving as the characters he so brilliantly brought to life. His dark secret, the internal battle he fought in the lonely hours, ultimately revealed a vulnerability that only deepened the world's appreciation for the man behind the unparalleled artistry.